Hello everyone and welcome back to this Football Manager 2017 experiment where we take a look at what would happen if the top 5 leagues in Europe all were given transfer bans. Now we saw last episode in the Premier League that Newcastle were Premier League champions for the third time in the last 5 years. They've won it 3 times, with Brighton winning it as well. And in the European Cup, both Brighton and Newcastle having won that competition. Now today, we're going to go 5 more years ahead because I think we're just at that tipping point where the bigger teams are slipping down the leagues and the promoted teams are starting to rise up them. So we're going to take a bit more of a detailed look at lots of different things, including regens, the World Cup, all of the cup competitions in the different leagues. So it might be a bit of a longer one, but then after this we can start to jump 10 years ahead at a time and have a look at where things are. So let's get straight into it, go 5 years into the future and do a little roundup of each country's leagues. Well, here we are 5 years in the future. We're starting with Serie A and the Italian League. You can see Inter Milan won the title in 27-28, AC Milan and Juventus up there as well. The following year, Fiorentina took the title 1 point clear of AC Milan. Still a very familiar look to the Italian League. The year after that, Inter pipped Atalanta to the title. Somebody corrected my pronunciation. I was calling them Atlanta, but they are Atalanta. The following year, again, Inter with the title, and then next year, AC Milan took it, and then finally, AC Milan took it again, but the big teams all just hanging on in there without a lot of difference in that Italian league. You had this year where Atalanta won the league, and they've been competing since, but Inter Milan, very much the team to dominate from this. Juventus haven't won a title in a very long time, so you can see where the titles are going. AC Milan, the current champions, and if we have a look at their other cup competitions, then you can see that in the Italian Cup there has been a bit of diversity amongst the winners, the likes of Torino, Verona, Lazio, Atalanta, Udinese, and then Lupa Roma of all teams winning the Cup, having been a newly promoted team. I mean, they were down in 1920 or 1819, they were down in the 3rd division. They've now risen up to a point where they've won the Coppa Italia. A fantastic performance from Lupa Roma to get so far. But now let's have a look at the next league. Well, the 5th ranked league is now Portugal. They've overtaken Italy. Braga, you might remember, were dominating this league, and I imagine they've continued to do so. They did win the title again and again and again and again and again. They win it by about 15 to 20 points every year now. You can see the bigger Portuguese teams really dropping down the leagues. I can't even see Porto in here. Have Porto been relegated? Porto were relegated last season. Sporting still in there for now, but down in 5th place. But Porto have been relegated from the Portuguese Premier League. In the Taça de Portugal, you can see Braga now won it 5 years in a row. A couple of wins in there for other smaller Portuguese teams, but the dominance of the likes of Porto and Sporting has definitely come to an end. And in the Portuguese League Cup, it's a familiar story. Braga winning a lot of the competitions. Definitely the Portuguese superpower now. But the likes of Sporting and Benfica still picking up titles. Chaves and Arouca both won titles as well, which is good for them, showing a bit more diversity in the winners of this competition. In Liga, you can see that Racing Club de Lens did win against Monaco, taking the title by 8 points. The following year, they retained their title by 12 points over PSG, then by 5 points over Monaco, 10 points again over PSG, and then again 20 points clear of Monaco. And finally, they've won it again. Racing Club de Lens doing absolutely fantastic. They were promoted in 18-19, and as a newly promoted team, they've done absolutely brilliantly, winning the title now 6 times and becoming the dominant force in Italy. They've got Donnarumma in goal, a player they've clearly signed, but generally their club doing very well. If we look at their senior squad, you can see if we sort them by valuation, they've got a lot of very, very good players in there. I imagine they have been challenging in Europe by this point. You can see a lot of diversity in the nationalities as well, because they are able to sign players from other teams. So they are now the dominant team in French football. In the French Cup, you can see Racing Club de Lens have won it 3 times now. Havre have won it as well. Stade Rennais, a little bit of variation around this time. PSG, though, still winning a lot of these competitions. And it's pretty similar in the Coupe de la Ligue. A lot more diversity here. Racing Club de Lens have won it as well 3 times, but Stade de Reims in there, Sochaux-Montbé, and Bordeaux with a couple. Metz won one, Stade Brestois won one, Nantes in there as well. So a lot of diversity. It's definitely a more competitive competition in the Cups at the moment. Now, the third ranked league is La Liga. You can see Bilbao won the title last time, 2 goals clear of Real Madrid. They won it the following year as well by 4 points before Real Madrid pipped Bilbao on the head-to-head ratio, despite Bilbao having the better goal difference. The following year, Barcelona took the title from Real Madrid by 1 point. The year after that, Bilbao did come back to win the title, and then Barcelona won it again. So it's still Barca, Real Madrid and Bilbao at the top of this league. If we have a look at the past winners screen, you can see now Bilbao really a dominant team in Spain, but Barcelona and Real Madrid still competing at the highest level. Barcelona's academy finally starting to show some value, but they don't have the best players in the world by any stretch. It is an all-Spanish team at least, and Real Madrid, if we look at their senior squad, you can see theirs has virtually no money in it whatsoever, and their best players are now getting quite old, so they could really start to drop off in the next 5 years or so if they continue to struggle. In the Copa del Rey, you can see still big teams winning the competition quite a lot, but the likes of Cordoba also win it as well. Celta Vigo won it, Sevilla have won the last 2, so a bit of diversity there, but largely still Real Madrid and Barcelona winning a lot of these competitions. Bilbao in there as well with a couple. The Bundesliga is now the second biggest league in Europe, and you can see Bayern Munich carried on dominating the Bundesliga. They did win it the following year, clear of Leverkusen, before Leverkusen pipped Bayern to it 3 points clear. The following year, Leverkusen retained the title from München Lions, who started to climb up the league. Then Stuttgart won it over Bayern. Bayern now dropping off somewhat, but did finally win the title again. If we look at the past winners here, you can see Bayern were dominating for so long, and then it was broken a little bit, but they're still in and around the top 3 before finally coming back to win the title once more. Managed by Diego Simeone, and they've still got some very good players in here, all Germans. There's one Italian in there who's 31 years old, a couple of other players as well coming through their academy, but £47 million Dennis Berra, the best player. He's a striker, and that will always be a huge advantage in trying to win the league. So Bayern not quite as dominant anymore, losing a little bit of that edge. Leverkusen coming in and doing very well, but still looking very good for Bayern as German champions. And in the German Cup, you can see Bayern with virtually no dominance whatsoever. The München Lions very unlucky. 5 times they've reached the final in the last 5 years, winning only once. A huge disappointment there, but a lot of variation in the winners, which is very nice to see, especially the last 4 or 5 years actually, or going all the way back to nobody has retained this title for quite some time. Bayern had this little period where they won quite a few, but it's definitely the most versatile title we've seen so far. And finally, you have the Premier League, where last time we left off, Newcastle had won the title, 2 points clear of Brighton. The following year, they retained it from Wolves, 6 points clear. Wolves, Newcastle and Brighton, definitely the 3 big teams in England at this point. The following year, Wolves won the title, their first Premier League title, clear of Brighton and Newcastle. Huddersfield in the top 4, the first time that none of the traditional big English clubs actually qualified for the Champions League. The following year, Brighton with the title, 1 point clear in Newcastle, Ipswich qualifying for the Champions League, and Spurs getting relegated. That is huge. The following year, Brighton winning the title, Newcastle second by 1 point, Wolves and Huddersfield in there as well, and then the following year, Brighton again winning the title by on goal difference from Newcastle, but no big team qualifying for Europe. They all went to former championship sides at the start of this experiment, and Manchester City finished bottom of the Premier League table. They have been relegated. They are still the big club in English football. They've still got a valuation of £1 billion, but they've now been relegated. If you look at their senior squad, you can see there's just not any real talent in there whatsoever. When your third most expensive player is from the UAE, you know you're in a lot of trouble, and they just have not been able to use their academy wisely. Let's just have a look at their landmark history, because something must have happened here. You can see they increased capacity of the stadium, but then they failed financial fair play in 2019. Runners-up in the EFL Cup, upgraded their youth and training facilities, but then scaled down funding. They no longer have the front-end billionaire owner, which isn't going to help them. in the future, and they failed financial fair play again. So real problems down at Manchester City. It'll be interesting to see how far they slide down in the future. But Brighton, 3-time Premier League winners, beating Newcastle to the top of the table. And it's the same 3 teams always at the top of the Premier League now. In the FA Cup, you can see a lot of variation has creeped into this. After the big teams were winning the competition, Newcastle have won it a couple of times, Brighton, Huddersfield, Brighton, and then Barnsley. But it's all former Championship teams in the final now, showing that shifting balance in the Premier League. And if we can have a look at the League Cup, now you can see Barnsley actually did the double. They won the FA Cup and EFL Cup in the same season. Newcastle and Brighton in there, Wolves in there, Brighton again. Middlesbrough and QPR winning the title. Barnsley actually won it 10 years ago as well, showing how much this league has changed. But that is it for the cup competitions. Let's have a look at Europe. Well, starting with the Europa League, in the quarterfinal stage, you can see Ipswich made it this far. Anderlecht managed to knock Arsenal out. Olympiacos, PSV and Ajax all in there as well. In the semi-finals, it was Ajax and Anderlecht who made the final, showing those smaller leagues starting to develop. And in the final, Anderlecht won the Europa League. There we go, a Belgian team succeeding in the second tier competition. The following year, Huddersfield through to the semi-finals on penalties. Stuttgart, Chelsea and Munchen Lions all in there as well. In the semis, it was Huddersfield and Chelsea who went through. Can Huddersfield win the Europa League? They can. Huddersfield beat Chelsea 1-0. A huge result for Huddersfield. Definitely their biggest competition in a long time. The following year, Arsenal, Anderlecht, Wolves and AC Milan all going through. Huddersfield and Ipswich in there as well. In the semis, it was Wolves and Arsenal who managed to make it to the final. And in the final, Arsenal beat Wolves. So a former big team managing to get that far. The following year, Sevilla, Olympiacos in there, Atalanta in there, Sporting Braga, Levante. You would not expect these teams in the Europa League quarterfinals at the moment. In the semis, it was Huddersfield and Munchen Lions who go through. Can Huddersfield retain or win again at the Europa League? They can. They beat the Munchen Lions 2-1. That's twice now that Huddersfield have won the Europa League. And then the next year, Aston Villa in there, looking for European glory once again. Getafe in there, Racing Club de Lens, PSG and Ipswich also going through. And in the semi-finals, PSG beaten 6-3 on aggregate by Aston Villa. How much would a Villa fan love that? Racing Club de Lens in there as well. And the final was won by Racing Club de Lens, beating Aston Villa and denying them European glory. Now in the Champions League, very different scenes here. You can see Newcastle in there, Brighton in there, United in there, Braga in there. But it was Munchen Lions, AC Milan, Brighton and Man United who made the semi-finals. Where it was Brighton and Manchester United who went through. Can Brighton win the Champions League for a second time? They can. They beat Manchester United 3-1 in extra time. Brighton with another European title under their belt. The following year, Newcastle went through. Brighton knocked out, unable to defend their title. Braga, Bilbao and Bayern all in there as well. In the semi-finals, it's Newcastle and Bayern Munich in the final, and it is won by Newcastle. There we go, another European title for Newcastle, just what we want to see. I'm loving this experiment as a Newcastle fan. The following year, Newcastle again made it through, beating Brighton to the semi-finals. Barcelona and Real Madrid also going through, as did Racing Club de Lens. In the semi-final, Newcastle knocked out Real Madrid and Racing Club de Lens knocked out Barcelona. Can Newcastle retain the Champions League? They can't. They lose it on penalties to Racing Club de Lens, who have definitely become a premier club in Europe now. The following year, Brighton knocked out Real Madrid, Wolves knocked out Bayern, Leverkusen and Barcelona going through as well. Good to see Anderlecht in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. In the semis, it was Wolves and Barcelona, or Wolves and Barcelona Champions League final. Can Wolves win the European Cup for the first time? It's Barcelona who take it on penalties, stopping Wolves from winning it. Heartbreaking for Wolves fans. And then this season, Newcastle beating Fenerbahce, Braga beating Anderlecht, Stuttgart beating Monaco, and Wolves beating Brighton. Virtually no former huge teams in there, other than Monaco maybe. All the others are teams that have risen out of nothing. And in the semi-final, you can see Newcastle beat Braga and Wolves beat Stuttgart. So it was Newcastle and Wolves in the final. And Newcastle win the European Cup. Wolves losing in the final for the second year in a row. And if we have a look at the past winners now, you can see Newcastle with 3 European Cups to their name. Brighton with 2, and Racing Club de Lens in there as well. Finally, the European Cup going to some different teams, although Barcelona managed to win it too. Heartbreak for Wolves, losing in the final 2 years in a row. But I am absolutely ecstatic that Newcastle are now 3-time European Cup winners in the last 10 years. Absolutely sensational stuff. Great for Brighton as well to get a couple in there. It'd be nice to see Wolves to maybe win the European Cup as well. Now, people were interested in the European coefficient rankings, and you can see that Newcastle, Brighton and Wolves are dominating this list. Right at the top, Braga up there as well. Racing Club de Lens now 5th. Barcelona and Bayern in there, still holding on to their high positions. Bilbao up there, Munchen Lions, Huddersfield, then Real Madrid and Arsenal, Anderlecht up there. Then you have a bit of a break before the likes of Ajax and Olympiacos, but they are the big teams up there. The likes of Ipswich now 23rd, Chelsea 30th. And just quite a lot of change right at the top end of this table. If we sort it by finances though and look at the richest clubs, it's a very different scene. Arsenal still top 2 billion, Bayern and Man United up there, Dortmund, Spurs, then Brighton are up there at 1.26 billion, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Chelsea, then Wolves at 1 billion, Newcastle up there at nearly at £1 billion as well, then Leipzig and Munchen Lions. But these teams are starting to catch up, and the likes of Manchester United, who were up at 2 billion, are now starting to drop down a bit, but they're still holding on to their wealth, which means that when this transfer embargo does come to an end, they will be able to compete again. Now, a lot of people were interested in the best players as well. The world's most expensive player, at least, is Armindo Alves, who is Portuguese and playing for Racing Club de Lens. If we look at his career stats, you can see consistent 7.2. He joined them on a free from Sporting. I imagine most of these players would have joined big teams on a free. Marcus Beck, who is German, he's worth £62 million. He joined Brighton for £16.5 million from Rapid Vienna, who signed him from Greuther Fürth. Still can't pronounce that name. And then you've got Freddie McLaughlin, who is at Arsenal and I think has been there since he was a youth player. So coming through the academy at Arsenal. Brighton have Jacopo Cicerelli. He looks like a fantastic striker. He's getting a lot of goals for them as well. Joined them on a free from Inter Milan, who were unable to hang on to him. Then Tran Van Quang, who is English, which is an interesting name. But he actually joined them from Vietnam, so he must have taken English nationality. Is he playing for the English national side? He is. He's got 73 caps for England. Joined Arsenal from Vietnam and is certainly doing very, very well for them. Otherwise, there's a lot of players up there, and it's interesting nationalities as well. A couple of English players in there, some Germans, but a lot of European players in here. Wolves have got somebody from the Ivory Coast in their team. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what effect it's had on the international teams, but we're about to find out because I'm going to take a look at the World Cup. Now, if we have a look at the past winners of the World Cup, I'm not going to go into any great detail. You can see Portugal have won it twice now, France and Germany in there as well, but it's all European teams in these positions. Portugal certainly seem to be doing quite well out of all of this, but they usually do very well. And you can see here right at the top, £70 million. They have the best player in the world, which is going to help them, £49 million. Antonio Oliveira in there as well. That is a brilliant strike force there with Antonio Costa, another Racing Club de Lens player. Looks incredible. That front three is firing them to World Cup titles. And if we have a look at their history of competitions, you can see in the European Football Championship they won it in 2016 but haven't won it since. The past winners of this competition: Germany, France, Italy and France. Romania making the final, as did Croatia. But I guess we want to take a look at the England national team, who are actually managed by Antonio Conte at the moment. Their senior squad has got a lot of good players in there. They really should be doing better, but they just have not progressed. They've not made into the top three of any of the major competitions, but they did win the European International League in 2029. That is the only competition they've won with these new players. So debatable what effect this has had, the lack of transfers, on the England national team, because a lot of the players will still be, if they're at lower league teams, they'll continue to ply their trade down there and not really be snapped up by the big clubs in England. So they don't have access to the best training facilities and they're not playing at the highest level. So there is a question there about whether it is good or bad for the England national team, all this foreign money and players being brought in from abroad, whether it's good or bad. But at the moment, it's only really Arsenal carrying the England team. Chelsea have got a few players in there as well. But Arsenal certainly chipping the most. Disappointed to see Manchester United struggling at the moment to produce good English talent. But yeah, England not really kicked on and certainly not won a World Cup since this started to happen. And if anything, it's benefiting the other nations a lot more. But that is going to be it for this part of this experiment. I hope you've enjoyed it. A lot of the things we looked at today were things that you guys requested. So if there's other stuff that you would like to see, do let me know down in the comments. And if you want to see more from this experiment, do drop a like on the video as well. If you're not that interested, I can always start a new one. So drop a like on the video to let me know that you do want to see more from this. And subscribe if you're enjoying all of these Football Manager experiments. But until next time, see ya.